Welcome, everybody, to the Substack. This is an interview today. I like to call it an authentic dialogue or conversation with Joe Carter, who is a very interesting fellow, has lived in China for many years, is an architect of some renown, and I'm so happy to have you here, Joe, on the Substack today to share some of your experience and your perspectives. So, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh. Yeah, the audience may not know that you and I have known each other since 1970, which is a long time, old friends. And this is a newish venture for you to do this Substack. And I congratulate you and admire you for taking it on. It's like putting yourself out there as to present, to share to a wider audience is it's a great skill to acquire. And I think these days more conversations are needed, and this is a great way to it's a nice platform to do that.
It is indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's taken a little bit of chutzpah uh,
Yeah.
to put myself out like this, and I really hope that it will be a medium for communication and dialogue and learning and healing as
Mhm.
well, because I've
Mhm.
worked most of my life as a therapist and teacher. So, but my dad was a journalist. He ran a small town newspaper in Wyerton, Ontario, and he also wrote a weekly column, which was till this day holds the record for being the most widely syndicated columnist in Canadian history. So,
Hmm.
so I have a little bit of that in my genes or my blood, I guess, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hoping that my dad is sort of, he just had a birthday. He would have been 105. Hopefully he's looking down from the next world and
Yeah.
giving
Yeah.
a little push or pull.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've known each other for a long time, and we don't see each other in the flesh that much these days, but once in a while. And I think this is the first time we've actually met face to face online. Usually it's a phone call, but it's really great to see you.
Yeah. Well, so
Yeah. So I have a
what are we going to
question.
talk about?
Let's
Yeah.
get going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, this is a question that I often ask my guests, and maybe we can start with this. Um, and it's really in your life, your 70 odd years, was there a point, or maybe more than one point, which provided a kind of a turning point, so to speak, or an epiphany, or an insight, or an experience that kind of opened you up and provided a path for your life journey, your spiritual life perhaps, or your philosophy, the way you see the world. And it's just, it fascinates me, this question, because people come to be who they are in so many different ways.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, the very short answer is yes, very much so. Had an experience, but and the longer answer, I'll spend a few minutes. Um, uh, it I went to university at McGill to study architecture starting in 1965, and in those days it was a 5-year course, and I liked it very much, but there was something I felt deeply something was missing, and after 3 years. I felt so uneasy and frustrated by something, the fact that something was missing. I quit school. And part of the nature of the what I was thinking about is back in the 60s, those were days of questioning, of a really a rapidly expanding sense of the world as one home, one place, like Expo 67 and the Americans landing on the moon and Sputnik and so on. So we really started to have a much more global consciousness, and that was transcending World War II thinking. And we grew up in the Cold War. So there was just something that it felt like all of us had to do something about our world or take advantage of the opportunities it was presenting. And my course in architecture, it seemed like I'd be designing buildings for wealthy people and making spaces that I could never afford to live in myself. And so this it didn't seem to be helping. And there was stories of some architects had started, for example, to go to South America, help farmers build houses, and there was some kind of a social dimension to architecture that was just emerging. I quit school for 3 years to just a kind of wandering in the wilderness, and I dreamt of going, yeah, to Peru to see the farmers, sort of an idealistic 20-year-old, and that never happened. I ended up in Yellowknife,
Mm.
and which is kind of I realize parts of Canada are our own third world. It's right here at home. You don't have to leave the country. You don't need a passport to
And quite exotic too.
yeah, very dramatic. And anyway, that during that 3 years um, of wandering and searching, I reached a point of pretty deep anxiety, depression, and in the middle of it, and I had two dreams. This is the epiphany or the beginning of the epiphany was one dream was I was a bird on the shore of the ocean. I start to lift up, and the bird is flying out over the sea and tries to fly towards the sun. The feathers start burning. You sort of can't do that. Go into the sea, a big swoop through the water, can't breathe. That's not working either. Come back up and surface, or sort of hovering above the surface, and realized if I yield myself to the breeze that's blowing, I can hover. I can I can fly with less struggling and obsessive goals and so on. And I was when I was in that condition, my wing I started to kind of become I started to dissolve. I started to melt, and also got instead and it started to fly towards the sun that was rising above the horizon, and the my wings, the body of the bird got huge. The wings covered the sky, and but kind of got diffused.
Mm.
And then the whole bird turned sideways, with one wing covering the sky, another wing covering the sea, and the body turned into a long, thin line that turned into the horizon. The feathers of the upper wing turned into the rays of the sun. The feathers of the lower wing turned into the waves of the sea, and no bird. And that dream, after I had it, I said, "Well, what's that about?" And it was a very symbolic kind of dream. And but after I had the dream, it's like a switch. I didn't know I didn't understand it, but I felt like, so Joe, stop worrying. The path will emerge. Something is
Mm.
so it was the pressure of the pain went way down, and and then I knew I was looking for something, and I ended up in Montreal at one point, and I when I was in Yellowknife, which is the first stop in my wandering, I met a young man called Buzz Gibson from Midland, which is your home, and he had a prayer book in his pocket. He didn't drink alcohol, and he was a member of the Baha'i faith. So, but we just became friends. That didn't register with me especially, but I really liked him, and we're about the same age, became very, very good friends. And we both left Yellowknife, and but then I knew I really had to see him to find him. That was I was even offered a job by a famous architect in Sweden. I turned it down, said, no, I have to find Buzz.
Mm.
So that there's a long story in there, but eventually I got there, and he's living on Scalded Street near Yorkville, which
That's
was the,
3 blocks from here, where I'm living right
is that
now.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Yorkville was sort of the hippie headquarters of Canada at the time,
Right.
and all the folk music scene and so on. But that wasn't important to me back then. It was, but I went to Buzz's place, said, "Hi, Buzz. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here." And he said, "Yeah, come on in." And And I think almost the next day, about a dozen, back in those days, it's the bell-bottom jeans and the long hair and the leather frill jackets and so on.
Wow.
And a gang pours in, and they said, hi Buzz, and oh, Who's this person? Okay, hi Joe, and let's say some prayers. So they all sat down on the floor, started saying prayers, and they were Baha'is. And anyway, make a long story short, 2 weeks later, I'm a Baha'i, and I think I found like the a deep intuition told me this was right. And it wasn't blind faith either, because I looked at some of the objectives of this faith
Right.
and, establishing world unity. And, okay. And there's not much, there's not no time to unpack all of that. But anyway, that since then, that became the narrative, my framework, my universe, like an endless ocean to pull things out and see the world with. So yeah, so that journey happened to me, and it impacts everything I do.
Beautiful. What a powerful dream. I've had a few dreams like that too, and they're just so vivid during the dreaming and symbolic, as you said, and that I remember. I go over them when I wake up because I don't want to
Mm,
forget them, and they stay with me for the rest of my life. So it started with a dream, and that kind of gave you, as you indicated, some kind of a reassurance that
yeah,
things were going to get better. Or somehow you're going to find your way. And then you met Buzz, who, for some reason, the dream and then Buzz, he really impressed you. What was it about him that was strong enough to have you give up a good job offer in Sweden, which sounds pretty great?
yeah. Um, uh, Again, this is one thing that has come up in my life quite a few times is understanding the importance of intuition.
Uh-huh.
And you cannot you make efforts to apply reason to it, but you can only go so far.
Can't do it,
And
yeah.
so it's always a combination or a balance of those things. So I had a deep intuition about Buzz that there was something incredibly calm about him that was genuine. It was really genuine. It's like he was in a place that was had confidence, assurance. It was a mystery, but I felt it. And that's he had something I wanted.
Right. And good for you to be able to have, I guess, been opened up enough to recognize that, even though you didn't understand it yet, but to
Yeah.
be able to follow that intuition and take the next step, which, well, great. That's a beautiful story. So you say that it's informed the rest of your life. That, I guess, the decision to become a Baha'i and learn from that spiritual tradition, spiritual
Yeah.
teachings. Uh-huh.
And also the to finish the dream story is that image of horizon and the sun above the horizon and the ocean and so on. Those appear not quite on every second page in Baha'i writings, you know, and those are metaphors that appear frequently
Yeah.
in Baha'i writing. So that was a bit of a confirmation
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. But that definitely uh, so that got me back to school. And that's another hurdle that this I don't know, some kind of I guess I had some confidence because of this, or some trust, some more trust. It's like in the dream, I didn't trust that the breeze could lift me. I tried to fly myself into the sun. I tried to find myself under the sea. So just hold your wings steady and let other forces help you. Is some That's part of that dream. So that's sort of what I did with my architectural studies. I said, okay. The architectural studies that I encountered are not, they don't have the social dimensions that I was hoping for that architecture could have, or that could be part of my life in the future. But I'm going to trust, like I have skills there. And this is the important thing. I had to assume the responsibility to make what I learned and apply it. I had to find a way to make it socially relevant. I wasn't going to reject the school because they didn't have it. I had to, that was my work. So I went back to school determined to, I'm going to jump in wholehearted, learn everything I can, and I'll work out this. Now it's become my issue, my problem, or my challenge to figure that out. And a really interesting surprise when I went back to school after being away for over 3 years, there was that an epiphany had happened to a professor. He said, "This architecture curriculum does not contain any there's no platforms for social expression." And he was really upset by the injustice in Montreal of the really poor condition of poor people, their housing and their finances, and so he abandoned his architectural practice and set up a program at the School of Architecture at McGill, where he set up what was called community design workshops. And you could work there and do real projects for real people in these, lower income neighborhoods of Montreal. So that was like, wow. But
Well, I
that wasn't there.
remember right around the time I met you in Montreal. I think I had met you just before, and then you were co-facilitating or managing one of those projects, and
Yeah.
you hired me actually for a couple of months. I had been at working at Expo as an usher. I ushed
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Expo '67, and it was an amazing little project. There were these little, because the streets went on an angle, and then there was a railway track, so there were little triangles of unused land,
Hmm.
and you and your team decided to grow vegetables for and to have them sold almost for free, really, very, very inexpensively to the local people in the neighborhood who are both English and French speaking, but lower income. And it was beautiful. So we were working away with carrots and all
Yeah.
kinds of
Yeah.
vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, with this professor who had a more of a social orientation, with with a classmate, we did a study of open spaces in Point St. Charles.
yeah, that's
That
where
was
it
part
was.
of the school curriculum,
Right.
and we made some recommendations for the use of unused land, and we proposed adventure playgrounds and vegetable plots. And then we got some money from a federal government program, thanks to Pierre Trudeau, called Opportunities for Youth. You could make proposals, and the government would give you money to implement them. And that's what we did with that summer. We made gardens and on unused land, and we adventure playgrounds. So that was a great learning experience. And so when I graduated finally from architecture, I knew how to grow tomatoes, broccoli. Uh,
Yeah,
but
picked up some
so
skills along the way.
picked up some
So
skills. Yeah.
there's that kind of, yeah, I don't know if you call it activism, but definitely a deep interest in social change
Yeah.
and being part of that somehow, contributing to that in your life, right?
Yeah. That was that was a very valuable experience to be able to almost literally translate the idea into action. I mean, sometimes it's not that easy,
That's
not
right.
that clear.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, just to jump to another, like having a marriage and children, that's an incredible social action. And it's not glorified by being, service to the country and anything like that. In fact, it's horribly under supported, I think. But anything and everything you do in your life, even your Substack, these are all things we contribute and try to make the world a better place somehow. So everybody finds their way.
So talk a bit about China.
Yeah.
If there's some kind of way to segue, as they say, from this conglomeration or configuration, of
Yes.
inspirations and
Yes.
dreams and
Yeah.
architecture and studies and social, practical projects. You had spent so much of your adult life in China.
Yeah. Well, after I graduated, I spent 11 years in Newfoundland,
Oh,
and first marriage, it broke up, it ended, no children. And I had always had a dream about going to China because back in the 60s, China was totally immersed in the Cultural Revolution and was totally isolated. And the more it was isolated, the more I was curious. And so that's too long a story to insert here. But when my marriage dissolved in Newfoundland, it actually turned that crisis turned into an opportunity. The old dream about going to China resurfaced, and I was free to pursue that. Um, and it helped that I lost my job because there was an economic downturn, and a drunk driver crashed into my car and destroyed it, and my cat died, and so
I
I
was just going to say your dog. You lost your dog too.
Yeah, so I was almost evicted, but at the same time I was looking for a way to go to China, and I managed to I discovered a course that was being offered by a school of architecture in Tianjin, which is a big city near Beijing, and that school of architecture offered a 10-week course for foreign architects, or students and architects to look at Chinese architecture
Mm,
and especially historical architecture. So I went, I did that. It was, and in those 10 weeks, that wasn't an epiphany. That was more like a new marriage. It was like falling in love. Because in those days, China, in 1978, China marks that as an important date when they decided to open up to the West or to the world. And and to allow more free economy and move away from 100% socialist model of development and experiment with new things and release more individual initiative.
mhm.
And they're so the 80s and 90s in China were incredibly vibrant and full of curiosity and innocence and a hunger to learn. It was so I happened to go in in the early days of that,
Right.
and it was astonishing and beautiful, and I fell in love. I just couldn't. I was walking on the plaza in the center of Tianjin University, and this music came on, and in the movies sometimes they use slow motion,
Yeah.
everything slows down. I really felt like that. The universe slowed down. I slowed down. And
Uh-huh.
this music was lifting me up, and I was crying. And I was just
Hmm.
so happy to be there. That was like the consummation of the marriage. And it was a song called it was a song about two young lovers who were not permitted to
Uh-huh.
marry.
Uh-huh.
And they committed suicide together instead and turned into butterflies.
Romeo and
So
Juliet.
yeah, the same spirit as Romeo and Juliet.
Heroic
This,
lovers.
yeah, and that's a very famous piece of music in China. And anyway, um,
So
yeah,
that
so
was a consummation and also a confirmation, perhaps, that you'd done the right
yeah,
thing and moved
yeah,
there.
yes. And just before the end of that 10 weeks, the architecture professors who were running our little program offered me a job, said, come back and teach, which I did the following year, the following fall in 1986. And I stayed for 30 years. Yeah, that was my new life. And in 87, I met my future wife.
Oh, you.
And in 89, we're married. 1990, number one son. And 1995, number two son. So, yeah, and
Change.
and in those days there was very little work. I mean, no, it was they were just starting to build. I had a chance to glimpse an old China, a poorer China, and participated in its explosive growth and transformation. And being an architect, that provided work opportunities eventually. At first, it wasn't so easy, but I had to learn the language. I had to understand their ways of doing things and all kinds of things. But eventually, even China, I think the underlying idea I'd like to share is that China gave me so much. It's like one way is like if you have an opportunity, and even just to travel anywhere is so valuable. You learn so much. But if you live in another culture, immerse yourself, you acquire a kind of a 3D way of seeing things. You become not just bilingual, you become bicultural and bifocal, and it's um, so that's a gift from China, and even in my career as an architect, I did some little projects in Newfoundland, and they were well received and so on. But I remember the first time I'm working in an office in China, and this young man beside me, I was about 40 years old by the time I was settled into China and working there. And the young man beside me said, "Joe, have you ever designed an airport?"
Mm.
And no, or actually, I had designed a little tiny airport in St. Anthony, Newfoundland,
Oh, yeah.
but I didn't mention that. He was thinking of something a little bigger.
Right.
So these young people in China were tackling a scale and volume of things that was just extraordinary. Eventually, I was able to participate in that, but I designed China has it's called the different academies, Academy of Science and Academy of
Hmm.
Social Science and so on. They have an Academy of Drama, and drama is becoming very popular in China, and their movie. People in the West are familiar with the expansion of their film
Yes.
film work. And so the drama school was great demand. They needed a new campus. I had a chance to design the whole campus. So for an architect to have a chance like that is just
Hmm.
extraordinary. So and plus my family life, of course, and my children. There's endless gifts I got from China.
You
So
have
that's
two
why
sons,
the
right?
yeah, two sons, and that's why the relationship today, my experience, and what's going on today vis-a-vis, say, China-US relations, there's obviously some like let's call it a Cold War is sort of what it is. And I think that for that to be the dominant narrative and dominating the information that the West receives about China is very unfortunate. And because just to jump to another more metaphor, if you imagine the human race as we've become so interconnected with interdependent, uh, and the only way all our problems have become so global, pandemics, the
Yeah.
climate, the economy, the problems we have are actually local uh, impressions of those global issues.
We're all
So
in this together, as they
yeah,
say.
we're all in the same boat, and so the only way forward is unity. Until we're connected together, working together, we can't solve any of these problems properly.
Mhm.
We'll solve it partially, and then it'll collapse, and or we wait for some big strong country. Please take care of that on our behalf, and but it's not work. It's not going to work very well until we're all united. And so that it's almost ironic, or maybe it's a sign that the greatest need for humanity, if you this is a bit oversimplified, but is for China and the United States to embrace as lovers.
Yeah.
That's a solution.
Yeah.
And but what's happening now is the opposite. So I hope we remember these days as, you know, maybe even get to laugh about it. I don't know. But
The image comes up. I'm going back to your butterflies, and if the U.S. and China are the two by far the largest economies in the world, and probably the dominating cultures and economies for the next while, good part of this century. And I see a butterfly or a bird, with two wings. So if China's one wing and the West or North America is the other, it's like the two wings are fighting each other instead of
yeah,
working together for the bird or the butterfly to go forward. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, well, I think you're really well placed to have arrived in China when you did, and that transitional stage where you are able to sort of have one foot in the old and a foot in the new that was unfolding rapidly in the 70s and 80s, early 90s. It was exciting, even just from here, reading about it or seeing little snippets on
Mhm.
television. It was like there was such a ferment, a cultural, and as you say, the curiosity of the people and just rolling up their sleeves and we can do this, a newfound confidence. It must have been very exciting. Whereas now, if someone were to go to China, it's like it's all been built up. These mega cities, and skyscrapers, and everything's very modern now. But to have been that at that threshold of the new
Yeah.
China,
Yeah.
and to also insert yourself, by marrying a Chinese woman and having raising two lads there, um, that was a real commitment. So you were there for 30 years altogether.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
And you're back in Montreal now, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah, that was precipitated by a number of things like aging parents,
Uh,
uh, um, health insurance was free or health Medicare in Canada, and also I was offered a job for a year to teach at McGill just for a year, and that sort of
your old alma
was
mater.
part of the yeah, that's right, at the School of Architects. So that's sort of a re-entry channel as well. And we ended up now we live in Montreal on the plateau, and yeah.
Yeah, I used to. When I
So
lived in Montreal, I used to go up and visit friends there. It's become quite Tony now, right? Or,
yeah, it's a bit a bit over the top gentrified in some ways. It's a bit of a tourist destination.
uh,
It has the classic Montreal staircases, and I live in a place like that. But my neighbors are neighbors. They're not, it's not an Airbnb street. There's really interesting neighborhood. And I've participated with some neighbors to create, well, it's called Les Bons Voisins de Berry-Rivard. It's like it's a Facebook page, but every year we have a couple of events that we organize, like block parties, and
it's great. I
it's
used to
very
go
nice.
to. I had friends. There were two brothers from Saskatchewan, and they lived on Rue Boyer. You know that one?
Yeah, that's close to here.
Is
Yeah.
that right? Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They were both
How's
amazing cooks, and they would invite me sometime. And they both played the piano too, which I had studied. So
Wow.
we had a lot
Nice.
in common. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, so we should start winding down, only because I know we've only really begun, but sometimes if people see that it's an hour-long conversation, they don't even begin to watch. They say, "Oh, maybe someday, tomorrow," and then it never happens. But in a way to kind of bring a denouement, to use a French word, or bring our conversation to fruition. And by the way, thank you very much for just I didn't have to say too much. You were just so easily able to share your ideas as they came to
Mm,
mind and very colorful. So, is there anything that you'd like to leave with people? Maybe
yeah,
about anything, really. I was going to say
yeah.
about the China and the U.S. because you just sort of got started with that, but it could be about anything.
Well, I guess I'd like to just reinforce the East-West relationship idea.
Okay.
And there's another concept that's very helpful is symbiosis, symbiotic.
Yeah.
Uh, I got introduced to that idea by Buckminster Fuller back in the 60s, and
Right.
he really that was one of his main themes. And he always gave an example. If you take say nickel and carbon and iron and you melt them, put them together, you get steel. And the tensile strength of those separate elements, if you add them up, is less than the strength of steel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like only when they are bonded do you get this extra strength. And that happened, and symbiotic relations are all over. You see them there, they exist very much so in nature. But I like this steel example of a symbiotic relationship or a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's a discovery waiting to happen for the East and the West, and for all of us on this planet. And whatever we can do to move that understanding forward is worth doing. And so I thank you for creating this opportunity. I
Uh,
think maybe somebody will hear this and appreciate the idea.
yeah. Well, I just saw somewhere on the internet, I think, or last night that the Chinese have now created a train battery based on sodium instead of lithium. So, in a way, the truth is simple, but sometimes it's a very complicated path to get to that simplicity. And when we listen to our indigenous people talk from that quiet place of wisdom and
Yeah.
ancient tradition and faith and ceremony and so on, there's a beautiful simplicity there. So it's as if within the very complex and complicated world and human society, there is a oneness, a simplicity. The truth is one, but man has multiplied it, I think Muhammad said.
Yeah.
And so that invention of using sodium, which is plentiful, and instead of lithium, which is becoming eventually scarce and very expensive, it's um, a demonstration of how technology and that spirit of innovation and creativity and curiosity, when they combine in a symbiotic way, it produces something that's very powerful, simple but strong, like steel. It's an alchemical thing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, is there a way that I know that you wrote something about China and U.S., which I really liked? Is there a way that people could access some of your ideas, or you have a website or anything like that?
Um, I have some things I could share. I'm at the moment working on a way to put them all online.
Okay.
Uh, but so they're not that easily available right now online. I wrote a short book about it's called Heavenly Mansion: Some Thoughts on China and the New World Order.
Oh.
The, the title is longer than the book, but it got translated into Chinese and was published in China in 2009. And that's one thing,
Can
as a
people
PDF.
access that somehow?
Well, that's something I would be happy to share, but I can't just give you. I could send it to you if
Yeah.
you do you have a platform you share with others. But or what I could do is I'll let you. I'm in the process of putting the various things I've written online in an organized fashion
Mhm.
with one link.
Mhm.
So maybe I'll forward that to you when it's
Oh,
ready.
okay. In the meantime, underneath the video, which will appear on Substack, I'll write a little blog as well, just describing our conversation. But maybe you can send me a link of something, even if it's just
Okay, I can send you some OneDrive links to put in that little bio.
okay.
People could click on it and find it.
Yes, just to have a little
Yeah,
connection. Maybe people, and if people
sure.
wanted to contact you, would you? You should come through me first.
Uh, o- okay, let's take a chance. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Throw my email address in there as
Okay.
well. See
Okay.
what happens.
Yeah, I'll put it underneath. Well, Joe, it's been a real slice, as they say, and
Yeah,
it's been groovy, as people used to say back in the '60s.
yeah, yeah.
I'm delighted to see you and hear your voice and share some of your story, and maybe it'll be a repeat performance or chapter two someday, if you'd like to come back.
Sure, that'd be nice. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And again, I want to say I admire your courage to sort of stepping into this world. Good for you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, I'm a Leo, so I've got that sun and the
Ah, okay.
pretty
Good.
strong Mars too, the sacred warrior archetype gurgling away inside. So it
Good.
pushes me over the brink sometimes, even though I'm really scared. But
Yeah.
still go ahead, have to.
Yeah. Good.
So thanks for the
Great.
encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take
Okay.
care, Joe.
Bye-bye.